With Venmo Stash, a taco in one hand and ordering a ride in the other means you're stacking cash back. Nice. Get up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash on your favorite brands when you pay with your Venmo debit card. From takeout to rideshares, entertainment and more, pick a bundle with your go-tos and start earning cash back at those brands. Earn more cash when you do more with Stash. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply. Max $100 cash back per month. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms.
Movie night hits different when you plan it with Fandango. Open the app, find what's playing, and grab your seats in seconds. No lines, no stress. Whether you're meeting up with friends or flying solo, Fandango makes last-minute plans feel effortless. Plus, with Fan Club, you'll save every time you go to the theater. Download the Fandango app and make movie night happen. Anytime, anywhere.
Whether you're gifting, decorating, or treating yourself, Lowe's December deal drops are here to help you save more all month long. Get up to 50% off select holiday decor. Plus, get up to 45% off select tools and accessories. Shop new December deal drops every week this month and get so much more out of your holidays. Lowe's, we help, you save. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
You have to control yourself!
Hi, Brian. We are Joe and Trace from Horror Queers. I actually got to watch your movie at TIFF, and then Trace just watched it last night. So we're very excited to chat with you about your directorial feature debut.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with a sort of softball question. So you've done a ton of adult-oriented TV shows over the years, and so we're curious why you wanted to make Dust Bunny, which is more of a gateway horror film, for your first feature.
Well, I think it goes back to those Pushing Daisies instincts that were, Pushing Daisies for me is a gateway horror show. It's about zombies and death and horrible ways to die, as well as like love and found family and those issues that are distinctively queer. So it didn't feel like it was a departure from anything that I had done, but more kind of like a return to Pushing Daisies style shows that are, I would say of all the shows that I've done, Pushing Daisies is probably most reflective of me as a human. It's like chock full of all the stuff that I love, from dogs to pie to, impossible romance and, murder mysteries and zombies. So there was something about the Amblin of it all. And I love gateway horror. I think that, growing up, like all my favorite film going experiences I would describe as gateway horror, if not active horror, the things that I was watching on, stolen cable that were, all stemming from that Wizard of Oz first viewing where you're like, holy shit, this is a horror movie. There's witches and evil trees and flying monkeys and, a queer friendly little girl who's hanging out with a bunch of gay dudes. And so it was, it's like Mary Shelley and, Gothic hanging out with, Dr. Polidori and Byron and Shelley. But, through a family friendly lens. And those were the things that I was always like, oh, like somebody has removed the fencing around reality that we can leave it behind and go into a much broader expression of a story that was very exciting for me. I was exposed to horror very early on just by having stolen cable. And then when I was making my own choices going to movies, whether it's Star Wars, which has horrific elements to it, Close Encounters certainly plays as a horror film in a big way. The whole abduction of Barry sequence is terrifying. John Williams' score, for the most part, is a horror movie score. And then getting into films like E.T. and Poltergeist and Gremlins and Goonies that all have horror elements to them. but are family-friendly affairs that are a heightened reality that allows you to be scared. And I think for queer people looking at these movies, particularly gateway movies, it's building armor with fictional fears that prepare us for our real life fears or real life experiences, just, being different and what that is to navigate.
Right. Well, actually, piggybacking off of that, like the Amblinville, because I love what you're saying about, E.T. And because E.T. was a movie I couldn't watch as a kid. It scared the crap out of me. And
it's a queer love story.
At the moment when he jumps out of the trees and scares Elliot, I couldn't do it. So I never made it past that part as a kid. So with this, though, I was watching this and I was so fascinated because I was like, this feels like a family film. But then the third act has some stuff where I was like, wow, like I feel like this would make it PG-13. But maybe in the 80s it would have been PG, like possibly. So when you were making
it's rated R. Like, this is an R-rated film.
Wait, this one?
Yeah.
Trace is stunned right now.
I'm very stunned right now, actually. Wait, what?
We were stunned, too. The MPAA is notorious about being really hard on independent movies and a little more lax on
studio films.
But there's no blood. There's virtually no profanity.
There's no nudity.
There's
no
nothing.
Foul language. It's a conversation with the MPAA. We got an R rating. They said what put us over the edges of the non-lethal toothbrush injury. So there's something about
Wait, but that put you into an R rating. I feel like there's another movie that has a similar eye thing with no blood that got PG. Well, I guess what you said, it's independent versus studio, but still, I was sitting here like PG-13 or PG.
That was his next question.
We were like, I thought we were making a movie for the whole family.
Yeah.
And I definitely wanted it to be a gateway experience where 10-year-olds would see this movie and say, yes,
I like horror now.
More. And that was certainly my experience seeing like The Wizard of Oz and having my appetite whetted. And then, seeing Alien when I was 9 years old and seeing Black Christmas when I was 7 and those types of things that were, that I loved. And I wasn't traumatized by them. I loved that I was watching people survive their stories. So there's something about the strangeness of the MPAA with independent movies. I thought this was a family film, and so many people who've seen it, like it's a family film. And so I hope it's a lot of kids' first R-rated movie that they get to see and sort of experience. And I would tell adults that, like, look, if you're on the fence, see it first, and you'll see that it's actually a really fun, rompy movie about a child. Who's wonderful in the film and a great heroine and protagonist that can be aspirational for other children her age in the story. And I thought we were making the movie for the ages of the actors, which is, from 10 to 70. It's good for everybody in those decades. So it may be an interesting marketing challenge as a result of that, but it was very strange that the MPAA was like, this will be a PG-13 as long as you don't put any blood in it. And we assume that there's going to be a ton of blood because of what the monster does.
Right.
But I was like, no, because part of there are conceits within the narrative that allow us not to be indulgent with the blood flow and to keep it family friendly and its cartoon violence.
So you're accepting the R rating, though. You're not going to cut up the toothbrush, or you're not going to try to appeal it.
Well, it gets expensive because you have to resubmit, recut, and we are just not that size of a film. And nobody's going to open it up or pay to open it up. To make those changes. And we would have to lose the toothbrush gag, which gets a good laugh and I enjoy and has, it gets a couple of good laughs, that toothbrush. So nobody wanted to cut it, and everybody just kind of said, like, okay, maybe there's a way to market this to people by saying you may think it's for adults because of the R-rated, but really you should be bringing your 10-year-old because they'll get just as big a kick out of it.
I was gonna say, yeah, like you can get like a really like kind of witty marketing campaign with that. But I expect though a lot of people that like watch this are gonna kind of be behind you and be like, this doesn't need to be rated R. Like that's honestly kind of bullshit, but whatever.
Yeah, it is. But there, like, it really is. And I mean, there are lawsuits with from, independent movies against the MPAA for how much stricter they are with independence than they are with studio fare. I mean, Megan, like, murdered children and ripped their ears off and slaughtered somebody with a paper cutter. And that was PG-13.
The power of Blumhouse. Okay. Thinking about censorship and edits and notes, we know that this originally started as an amazing story on Apple TV, and you've been pretty vocal about saying it just never went ahead because I was getting notes to death. And we were just wondering, can you give us an idea about what some of the concerns were? Like, we don't want you to get in trouble or anything, but just we're trying to figure out, like, this seems like that would have been very suitable to something like Amazing Stories as well.
It was, I think really because it was their first television show. Amazing Stories was going to be Apple's first television show.
Right.
And so I don't know what the concerns were because I felt like we were honoring the Amblin contract with the audience. And so it wasn't necessarily about it being too violent. But there was an impetus there that the shows be almost G-rated. And because Apple is a family brand, this would be like playing in Apple stores. And I think there probably were assumptions about the guy who just did Hannibal and had somebody cutting off their face and feeding it to dogs on broadcast television, telling a story that was supposed to appeal to families. And if anything, I imagine there was a lack of trust or an assumption that it was going to be non-family friendly.
Right.
But I mean, those movies are the movies that I want to make and want to set out to make. So I feel like it was perceptual and presumptive and what the story was going to be, as opposed to stopping and accepting the story on its terms and projecting an expectation because of what I had recently done on television. I mean, I had a flaming bareback raw dog on American Gods, and Hannibal was doing all sorts of crazy shit to people's bodies. So I think they were probably like, what is this going to be? Versus,
do what you want.
Yeah, I think probably, if anything, there was just a lack of trust on what I would do with it.
I will say, because we've been covering Hannibal on our Patreon feed, and we just finished season 2, and like we'd seen it before, but it's still to this day, when we watched the Michael Pitt face cutting scene, even today, we were like, how the fuck did he get away with this? And I read your interviews, I need the shadows and all that shit, but I'm looking at I can see that I can see that happening.
Well, I'm blanking on her name. I haven't said Joanna Jameson was our Standards and Practices executive at NBC, and we got along fantastically. And it was very kind of preemptive in that I would go to her and say, how do we do these things that we need to do? Because you know the material, you know the book, and you know what the audience is expecting of it. So we have to honor that, but I know we have to color within the lines, and if you don't do what you say, you just won't air us. So let's make sure that we're all doing something that we can get behind and support. And she was fantastic. Every conversation, like I have a book on my I is all of our Standards and Practices conversations, which are hilarious. And so many things about like, be careful about this, be careful about that. But I never felt constrained by the gore on NBC, and there was something about being able to like just steer right into those waves that was really satisfying. And just knowing that, like, okay, the blood can't be red and the violence has to be in shadows. And I mean, we like gutted people and doused people with their blood. And there was like, blood bukkake shots all over that series that were super fun to do. And they just, the communication was key. Like, just keep it communicative, keep it non-adversarial, and realize that, what I had in the gift of Joanna Jameson being our Sanderson Practices executive is that I knew she wanted us to be able to do the things that we wanted to do. And she wasn't there to police or to scold. It was about, how do I help these creatives do their job and also protect them from not having their work seen by stepping out of bounds. And it was very collaborative and really satisfying and highly comedic.
Yeah. Well, speaking of comedic, one thing I really, really, really liked about Dust Bunny is that a lot of the characters have like, I'm assuming an intentional character quirk to them. So like whether it's Sigourney Weaver's, jaw clenching, or Des Malchian's, the way he chews his gum at the end of the scene. I don't know. Was that something that you had written in the script, or was that something you had worked through the actors ahead of time in advance to be like, hey, like give your character like this one thing?
Well, the jaw thing is in the script. And I mean, it was hilarious because, Sigourney's done this and is such a pro. She was like, oh, and I'm going to do a fun thing with the jaw. You'll like it. And I was like,
her face was so elastic. It was incredible.
And a lot of people were like, is that a visual effect? And I was like, no.
It's just her.
Make jaw. And, there were certain things about, storytelling. It's just like specificity is your friend. And so it's always about like, make a choice. And in the writing, there's so many times where I'll write a scene and then I'll go back and have to like find the more specific extrapolation of the idea within the scene, just to give them something to grab onto, and the actor will run with it or not, or come up with something that is a buttress to that idea and supportive of it in some way, but slightly different, and being open to those things. There's like, I live in fear of not finding the better idea and the better idea escaping me. So I love to hear people's ideas about things because I can say yes or no. And usually I say yes because I'm like, try it. Let's do it. And if it doesn't work, I won't use it. But there's something about those moments that are giving actors ownership of the role, and also the writer, which happens to be me in the circumstance, an opportunity to make choices. And it's always fun.
So speaking of choices, one of the other things that we really liked was just how kinetic the film feels. Obviously, not just in the action sequences, but it feels like you're constantly keeping the camera moving, and it's playful and exciting to watch. So can you unpack your directorial vision? Like, why'd you keep that camera going everywhere?
Well, it really was about, we consume so much, and I have consumed so much, and there is so much to consume in terms of people's directorial styles. Of course, I was very early on obsessed with Spielberg and those stories. Those were the ones that I was like, this guy's got a beeline. And an extrapolation of Steven Spielberg is Stephen King, and like the way he tells stories with young protagonists. And there's a huge crossover between those two circles in the Venn diagram. So I like the sort of slightly more polished studio presentation of production. Cameras on dollies, not doing a lot of handheld. I like handheld camera is so ubiquitous, and I find it like it's lost a little bit of its sheen. And for me, because I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, it's tricky to keep the cameraman moving with those instances, but there's a lot of Spielbergian push-ins in this movie. There's a lot of Tobe Hooper sort of push-ins in this movie. There's a lot of Joe Dante, a lot of David Fincher, John Carpenter, Barry Sonnenfeld, people that I've admired and consumed. But there's a tremendous amount of French maximalism with, the works of Jeunet Caro and Delicatessen and Amélie and City of Lost Children that are fantastic worlds that are so lovingly crafted that it's like I wanted to do that too.
I think all those influences are also like very clear in the film. And so like, because the film was shot on set in Hungary, but like despite like a Chinatown sequence, and again, like you said, this kind of Amélie vibe, the setting is never fully specified. I'm assuming that was intentional, but why adopt kind of this like placelessness or like everywhere type setting?
Well, I think that goes to the fairy tale of it all. I mean, we have the Brooklyn Bridge, like in background shots of like when we're outside of the apartment building, you see down the long cobblestone road that the Brooklyn Bridge is back there. So we're suggesting it's a New York of fantasy, a fantasy version of New York, a heightened version of New York, and what that looks like. So it all kind of was about if you don't know what the world is, and I'm working on something now that has a bit of a Rashomon quality to it. So, really it was about trying to create a sense of reality that didn't tie it into a specific reality that would cause you to question the heightened version and wonder what it is, as opposed to just going with the flow and having subtle hints like the New York license plates or the Brooklyn Bridge in the background and not making too much of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Okay, so building on that, one of my favorite things about the film is just how maximalist it is. So just like everything from the wallpaper to all of the set designs, like it's packed with visual information that's very exciting and interesting. So
every shot was like just exciting to see, like it's almost like an I Spy. Where it's like, what's going to move in the shot this time?
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, can you tell us how does that process come about? Was it just like, I want interesting things for audiences to look at, or was it a little bit more sort of organic?
All of the above, in a way. There's something about wanting to keep the camera moving because there's an emotionality in that. Like there's something about the kind of push-ins that different filmmakers use and what they're trying to convey. And that also goes to the lens choices that we were using and how to factor different degrees of detuning for the lens for whatever like psychological effect. That's all kind of a reactive experience, like looking at the frame. Like if I'm feeling an emotion looking at the frame, if Aurora is isolated, and she is this girl alone in an adult world, and there's the opportunity for threat and danger to encroach upon her by the big spaces that are surrounding her. That felt like a nice psychological motivation for those types of things. Also, the aspect ratio being like super wide also created a sense of fear and isolation and fairy tale-ishness that whenever I'm looking at something, I have a wider peripheral vision than I do on my tops and bottoms. And so that kind of reflects a experience of what it feels like to move through any sort of space, having a wider aspect ratio. And, the maximalism, to be blunt, that's just sort of my untethered faggotry, trying to I love pretty things, and I love, the specificity of design. And there's something very queer about that is about making sure that everything's pretty. Like the costumes are pretty, the locations are pretty, the sets are pretty, and that beauty that also becomes a gravy that covers the whole piece that I enjoy as a filmmaker. But really it was seeing, Delicatessen in the 90s and then City of Lost Children and Amelie and going like, I want to do that because that looks like a ton of fun. And my rods and cones are super happy at all the colors they're experiencing. And so much of the storytelling that we're seeing is about desaturation right now. And I was like, turn up that saturation. Let's see those colors.
Every time you see a trailer, it's just blues, grays, things like that.
Oh boy, we're back in the early 2000s, aren't we?
I'm glad you mentioned the costumes though, because the costumes in this movie are fan-fucking-tastic. But I was wondering though, like, because are Mads' costumes perhaps like an homage to your own sense of fashion?
You're literally wearing a tracksuit right now.
I am wearing a tracksuit right now. It was about like the tracksuit that he wears was, you know, an homage to, of course, Bruce Lee, because Maz and I bonded about that very early on in our friendship. You know, the footprint on his chest is a, you know, reference to Game of Death with Bruce Lee and Kamal Abdul-Jabbar. And so there were things like that were references. Like I was like, you know, we need him in a yellow tracksuit. That's not going to, like if we do too much Bruce Lee, everybody's just going to think Uma Thurman because they don't have the vocabulary to reach that far back into cinema history. And so they're just going to be looking at that reference point. And, so I was like, some form of yellow tracksuit. If, you know, like this or better, it can be like more fashion. And they're like, why don't we just use that? And I love a Wales Bonner tracksuit. So I was like, well, let's see if she'll let us use it. And, but his other inspirations, there's Paul Newman, you know, his denim, jumpsuit is pulled right off of a old publicity picture with Paul Newman and Clint Eastwood. Mads and I very early on were talking about, you know, the Paul Newman-esque quality, Paul Newman, Steve McQueen quality of this character that we wanted to invoke. And, you know, I sent him the image of the jumpsuit and he was like, that's super fun. And I sent it to, wardrobe and they're like, got it. But so we had Paul Newman as a reference, Bruce Lee as a reference. Don Knotts as Mr. Furley in his leisure suit from Three's Company was a reference. The tea room, he's in that big, wide collar and the leisure suit. That is, you know, something that you would expect to see Mr. Furley rocking Jack and Janet and Chrissy's home with, although Mr. Furley came after Chrissy was long gone. But you get the reference nonetheless. So, and then his hoodie stuff was Olivier Benoit, who is our costume designer for everything but Sigourney's work. Sigourney's costumes were designed by Catherine Leterrier, who has been working with her since Gorillas in the Mist.
Wait, so Sigourney has her own costume designer that she brings from film to film?
Well, she was like, who's doing the costumes? And I was like, well, we just lost my person because of, you know, our schedule moved. And she was like, I've got it covered. And I was like, oh, great. How's this going to go? And I should have just known that it's Sigourney. So it's going to be, you know, of refined taste. And she sent me the names and I was like, holy shit, like they would do this because they were like amazing French costume designers that have done spectacular work. And she was like, I'll send them the script and ask them if they're interested. And she did, and they were. And Olivier, who was sort of like the other gay on the set in, you know, a country that doesn't look upon gays terribly well. And so that was one of my favorite people to work with on the production, another gay, and we were able to have all of those filthy conversations and commentaries that gay men, when left to our own devices, will indulge in. And, you know, it was a tough production and he was such an ally and an asset, and he made me laugh every single day of the production. And we bonded very early on because he was like, I want to talk to you about the impetus for the script. And like, are you Aurora? Are you the intriguing neighbor? And I was like, I'm always the little girl. And, we went to breakfast and I was like, who are you? Who do you see yourself? And I was like, I too am the little girl. And we started talking about our respective tricky childhoods and how we navigated them and how we see ourselves in Aurora and how Aurora is sort of this champion for kids to be their own heroes. and be that kind of hero. And hearing the personal stories of people who see themselves in Aurora, and why they see themselves in Aurora, and why they might make the wish that Aurora makes. And is it about not getting cha-cha heels at Christmas, or is it about something deeper and bigger and more impactful that is not unique to the queer experience, but certainly illuminates a queer experience?
Right. Okay. So speaking of queer Christmas wishes, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you for a status update on any kind of return to Hannibal, because obviously people are going to look at this and say, so you've got Mads and you together again. Does that portend anything? And if so, could you give us any like little taster of what you would do if you could get that wish back together?
Well, everybody wants to return. Will, who's played by Hugh Dancy, and, Hannibal is Maz, but Lawrence Fishburne, Katie Isabel, and Carlin Devana, and Laura Jean Chorostecki, and Aaron Abrams, and Scott, all want to come back to the story. And right now it's a little complicated. Since Martha De Laurentiis is passing, the rights are in the process of reversion to Thomas Harris. Of course, MGM, Amazon has some. They're all being navigated in a way that is going to be a little trickier to iron out now. They're in process. I keep on touching base and trying to encourage folks to get back together. I've talked a little bit about wanting to do a Signs of the Lambs adaptation, which may be free of certain obligations to include Galmont, who is the studio on Hannibal. You can't copyright a performance. So, there are things that we're trying to figure out if we can get away with that would make it an easier path, that might shake the possibilities loose of things that we might be hindered from doing at this point, given the status of the rights. But, I also, I want to return to Pushing Daisies, I've pitched a third season of that to Warner Brothers and written a Bible of what that would be. And we were talking about it before the strikes, and they were very serious and excited about it. And then the strikes happened and disoriented everybody. Yeah. And they were like, we don't know if people want to do this. We don't know what people want. And I was like, well, if you figure it out and you want to do it, here's the story, which you love, I love, the cast loves, and we all want to come back. And that has a simpler,
it's an easier path.
Yeah. I don't know what I want more. Do I want Hannibal season 4 or Pushing Daisies season 3 more? It's like a Sophie's choice.
Yes and yes.
I mean, Pushing Daisies is the easiest path, but both of them still have to have somebody who says, we want to produce that, we want to put that on our airway.
Right.
But for you, the book is not closed on either one.
No, I would love to return to both of them. I love those actors. I love the worlds of those stories. I know exactly what season 4 of Hannibal is. And I was frustrated with season 1. It felt like a little more traditional television for me. There was a lot more murder mystery of the week, crime procedural kind of things. Yeah. I was not necessarily drawn to as an audience member. But I thought season 2 was better. And season 3, I was like, okay, this is what we should be doing. This is what I want to be doing. This is the type of storytelling that I think the show can do. And there's a lot of people who don't like season 3. And I was like, then you really don't want a season 4, because that's it. You're not down with season 3. You're not going to be grooving on the plan for season 4, because it's following that arc.
It's not about what they want. It's about what you want. I think we will be happy if you can give us anything. That's the point that we're at. We would just like to see more from you. Unfortunately, this is the end of our time, though. We are being told to wrap it up. So it was an absolute delight. Thank you for letting us chat with you. And hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Yes. And if there's anything that you didn't get that you want to follow up on, I'm happy to get on the phone again, or Zoom or what have you. And I love that you're out there talking about queer horror.
Always.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Bryan.
Thank you. You too.
Venmo Stash, a taco in one hand and ordering a ride in the other means you're stacking cash back. With Venmo Stash, get up to 5% cash back when you pick a bundle of your favorite brands. Earn more cash when you do more with Stash. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply. Max $100 cash back per month. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms.
Movie night hits different when you plan it with Fandango. Open the app, find what's playing, and grab your seats in seconds. No lines, no stress. Whether you're meeting up with friends or flying solo, Fandango makes last-minute plans feel effortless. Plus, with Fan Club, you'll save every time you go to the theater. Download the Fandango app and make movie night happen. Anytime, anywhere.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.